Welcome back to Marathon Phoenix Commentary. My name is Ryoko TK. This level is Neo New Mordor. As you can see, this is the longest video to date. That is because this is probably the longest level to date. It certainly is the most difficult level thus far. In the beginning of Chapter 3. The objective of this level, there's a couple of objectives. The first one is that you're looking for, you're given an uplink chip right at the start of the level, and you're looking for a place to put that uplink chip in. Doing that exposes some wires, some delicate wires that you have to find and break. This is a very non-linear level. Well, not non-linear, that's actually not exactly true. It's a very open level, but there are gates in certain places that still kind of funnel you along a specific route, at least for the first half of the level. This is one of my favorites in terms of how the design came together, but definitely one of the most frustrating and the most challenging to play because this level is hell. It is so hard, and the big reason for that is the terrain. You are constantly at a disadvantage in terms of monster positioning. And you can see, like this room, for example. There are multiple enforcers in that tower that have a perfect bead on you because you have no real cover out here. Defenders are flanking you from over the lava pit. You've got other enemies that are sniping at you. And of course, once I start to traverse this room, I'm going to be jumping over pits of lava, so a bad step will kill me. And this is pretty standard for the level. There's always enemies that have high ground advantage on you. The level is laid out such that every enemy gets to use their advantage over you. And it wasn't really intended to be this difficult, but that's just sort of how the monsters played with the design. And I liked it, because this level, plot-wise, is supposed to be an assault on a major renegade stronghold. That's the whole chapter, and each level is further into that assault. So in this case, the renegades are holding a defensive position, and so it makes more sense, but yeah, just very, very tricky. And the level is so open, and the sightlines are so long that enemies get a drop on you from a very long distance away. This level only really exists because it existed in a previous project that I worked on. The history of Marathon Phoenix is kind of weird. Back in 2005, I started to make a little mini scenario for Marathon Infinity, and that would eventually evolve into a conversion called the Gray Incidents. I finished that in 2006. It was 17 levels long, and it used the same texture set, and it had, at the most superficial level, the same plot that Phoenix does now, with the renegade enemies and stuff like that. And Phoenix was originally conceived as just like an enhanced remake, or sort of a special edition of that. And originally, it was only going to be, well, it was the weapon set that I have now. The scenario, the Gray Incident, had half vanilla weapons and half new weapons, and so this re-release that I was originally doing was going to just have all new weapons, which is the weapon set that you're looking at now, and replacing some of the poorer levels, or some of the clumsier levels, with updated sort of remakes. And this is one of those. The original attempt at this level was pretty much the same. It was actually a little bit more moodier, but it was the same sort of like fortress in a mountain over a lake of lava, and you kind of traversed it in the same way. But it was just really inconveniently laid out, and so that's what precipitated this second pass at the same concept. What I didn't anticipate was how much more difficult it was going to be. Because by cleaning up the level, it had all these gigantic open spaces and tons of enemies to attack you from all sides all the time. So we're still on the first leg of the level here, just trying to work my way up around the perimeter of this fortress, I guess you'd call it. Trying to get my way inside. The way that this level is laid out, because it is very open, you're pretty much free to return to this pattern buffer and recharger at any time. And that was kind of the intent of the design, is that it would continuously loop back so that it was convenient to keep hitting up this recharger. And also, the ammo respawns infinitely, so this is the only place to get ammo in the map, or common ammo, like assault rifle ammo and fusion ammo. So you are really intended to be continuously returning to this point. And because there are really no sort of interior areas, no one-way doors or anything like that, except for one point, there was no situation in which I could sort of challenge you through sort of attrition, because whenever anything gets too difficult, if you start to get worn down, you can retreat and recharge. So I was sort of compelled to make it challenging by way of making encounters that would just straight up kill you very, very quickly. So if you screwed up, then you would be flattened. Because my assumption going into each fight is you were going to have full shields, full double health, and a fresh save every time, since that is doable without costing a lot of time. Of course, I was trying to save as little as possible in order to make this video a little more watchable, and as such, I had a really difficult time with this level. But I had a lot of fun designing it too. The original version of this level back in the scenario of the Gray Incident, which I don't talk about that scenario. It's not very good. It looked more like almost like a castle or something, like a sort of Quake 1 style space gothic castle, and it was really cool. In that sense, the old version of this level is cooler than this one. Because it didn't have these gigantic open spaces. It was just more, it was a little darker, a little more cramped, but had the same sort of setting. This one sticks with the big spaces for the big battles, which works better for the setting, but loses a little bit of the charm, I guess. But it was still fun to make this updated version because of how the level comes together. And originally, the objective of this level was different. The sort of way that your objectives were gated was done a little bit differently, and it was more open from the start. It was another one of those you have to find all the terminals kind of levels. And I actually ended up changing it because it was sort of too unclear how you were supposed to address the level, because there is a sequence that you have to follow because of how many locked doors there are. And in order to access certain parts of the level, you have to open some doors. So I just changed how the level, and also the mission didn't make a lot of sense plot-wise. Not to mention it was sort of a repetition of the same mission from the first level of the previous 2 chapters, so I mixed it up a little bit here. But there's a lot of at the beginning of the level, of course, you're kind of running through these canyons and like passing between all these towers and jumping along, the lava lakes and stuff like that. And you're on low ground the whole time. And as you progress through the level, you get to go into some of the higher areas, sort of the ramparts or whatever. And, as you unlock the doors, you kind of use the high ground as sort of a highway between other regions of the level. It ties it together in a really neat way, in that at first it looks like a series of distinct regions in the level, but it all gets brought together in a way that I'm pretty pleased with. We're coming up on the first objective, which is putting in the uplink chip. This is one of those boss battles. Back in the previous episode, I'm sorry, 2 episodes ago, I talked about how the boss battles were kind of a relic, and that's true. This is sort of a stupid fight, and because of course you're seeing I'm easily circle strafing these guys with the assault rifle. So ironically, the boss fight is probably the easiest part of the level. The level is very, very difficult because, again, of all the high ground issues, all the monster strengths being brought out, and in this case, that's a non-issue. You're fighting all these hunters on sort of your own terms. But anyway, now that the uplink chip is in, the objective is to find these 3 wire panels and break them. And this is all told to you in terminals. These are all stated objectives. And this is sort of the ramparts that I was talking about earlier, the higher access. And you might think in your head that now that you're sort of in this high ground and you're in these sort of more enclosed spaces that you're safer, and that's completely not true. I died probably 10 times in this part of the level. Part of this is because of these stupid defenders. These defenders are not part of this fight. They're not triggered by anything over here. It's just sort of a byproduct of their own behavior. They got triggered by something else and flew away. And I never saw them or engaged them at that time. It just turned out that they sort of did their own thing, and this is where I happened to be running into them again. Also, all those guys down there, I don't know where they're from. But it's actually a pretty dynamic challenge, and that's a cool thing. An unintended byproduct of the level design actually turns out to be a very challenging aspect. You see I'm returning, of course, to this recharger here. And there's a lot of switches and stuff that make this hub sort of accessible again. And it allows me to sort of be economical with my placement of the saves and pattern buffers, which I kind of like. It's sort of like a personal goal. It's like, how few of those can I use in one long level? And so even though it's an open level, you keep being sort of ushered back to it in a way that's sensible, and it doesn't feel like you're backtracking. One thing I like about the fusion cannon and the charge shot of the fusion cannon is it has a huge amount of knockback. You might have seen how I used a shot and knocked one of them off a ledge. I'll actually do that a couple times to a couple of Mother of All Hunters enemies on this level. I will pushes them back like that. I'll push a Mother of All Hunters into the lava pit with the charge shot of the fusion cannon, and it's a funky kind of. I mean, I did it on purpose for that reason. To gives the weapon a little more impact and a little more makes it feel stronger, even though, I guess the shot is stronger than it used to be, but it just gives it a good stickier feel. And I'm actually using it here to keep pushing the hunters back off of my position because I'm kind of pinned down over here. which is something that would have not been possible in vanilla with the vanilla weapon set, because none of them really have that sort of utility except the assault rifle. Just doing this to clean up one of the secrets here. This was one of the levels that was probably more difficult to make, more difficult to kind of tie the pieces together in a way that made sense to navigate, make the level more navigable in general. And I sort of plunked down the objective points randomly. Where the wires are now they're the same places that the objectives were earlier. I just changed it from a terminal that you had to read to a wire that you had to break. But they were in all the same places. And it's kind of hard to know, as a designer, what's going to trip people up, like, and make them lost, and what's going to make sense from sort of the natural flow of the level. And unfortunately, in such a small community like that of Marathon, it's sort of hard to get a good level testing pool. Because, well, it's not a lot of interest in it. But also because in such a small pool, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to find anybody that is able to give sort of critical level analysis. And that's something, it's extremely valuable, of course, to find even 2 or 3 people that are able to play a level or play your whole scenario. First of all, willing to do that for you, and then also able to address problems in the level that are a little more meta. When I was getting testing done for this scenario, most of the feedback that I got was like, oh, you have a sticky wall here, oh, this wall, it's kind of glitching out, oh, monster got caught over here. And that stuff is useful, but at the same time, it's kind of not, because it doesn't get to the problem of a level being bad. And nobody had really told me if I was making bad levels or not, except for one level that's coming up, and I stubbornly left it in the game, and I hate it. I like it and I hate it, but we'll get to that later. Escape 2000. But, I never really got the feedback on this, a level like this, that it's hard to navigate. It's hard to find the objectives. I have no idea. I still don't know. I think it makes sense. But hopefully you'll have, if you, the listener, ever get into serious level design, you need to find somebody whose opinions you value, but also somebody who you think is insightful enough to give you that sort of critical approach. Because a good critic they don't want you to fail. They want you to succeed, and they're not saying critical things to be mean. They're actually trying to be as helpful as possible by being incisive. Anyway, that was sort of a tangent. This level's done. We're going to move on to this one, A Change of Seasons, in the next episode. Thank you for watching.